It was almost midnight when a black luxury car stopped outside the Royal Heights Hotel. The glass doors opened slowly, and a tall man stepped out. He wore a dark suit and carried no luggage, only a small silver briefcase. His name was Richard Hale, one of the richest men in the city, but also one of the most secretive. The hotel staff whispered as he entered the lobby. Everyone knew his name. His face had been in newspapers many times, the man who owned tech companies, airlines, and even a chain of hospitals. But tonight something was different about him. His eyes looked tired, and he kept checking his watch as if he was waiting for someone. The manager rushed to greet him. "Welcome to Royal Heights, Mr. Hale," he said politely. "We've prepared the best suite for you in room 407. Richard nodded without smiling. "No one should disturb me," he said in a low voice. "No calls, no visitors, and no room service." The manager agreed quickly. "Of course, sir." Standing nearby was Maria Lopez, one of the maids. She had been cleaning rooms on the 4th floor all evening. She watched the scene quietly. Something about the man's tone made her uneasy. It wasn't arrogance. It was fear. As Richard took the elevator up, Maria noticed 2 men in dark clothes enter the hotel right after him. They didn't go to the front desk. They just followed his path with cold eyes. Maria frowned. "That's strange," she whispered to herself. On the 4th floor, the hallway was silent. The carpet was thick and soft, and the lights gave off a golden glow. Room 407 was at the end of the corridor, right next to the service closet where Maria kept her cleaning cart. Richard entered his suite and locked the door behind him. Inside, the room looked beautiful. Large windows, golden curtains, and a big king-size bed. But he didn't care. He walked straight to the desk, opened his briefcase, and took out a small USB drive. His hand shook slightly as he placed it inside his jacket pocket. He sat down and whispered, "Just a few more hours. Then I'll be free of this." Outside, Maria finished cleaning the nearby rooms. When she passed 407, she heard soft footsteps inside, pacing back and forth. Then she heard a voice, Richard's, talking to someone on the phone. "I told you not to call me," he said sharply. "Yes, I have it. But they're following me. I can't trust anyone now." Maria froze. His voice was tense, scared. She stepped back quietly, pretending to dust a table, but her mind was racing. Who was following him? Why was he so afraid? Down in the lobby, the 2 men from earlier were sitting on a couch near the elevator. They looked out of place, and no luggage, no smiles, no conversation. One of them spoke into a small earpiece, whispering something. Maria noticed them again when she went downstairs to refill her cleaning supplies. The manager was busy with a late-night check-in and didn't seem to notice anything strange. She kept her eyes on the 2 men. They didn't move. They just waited. Maria had worked at the hotel for 5 years. She had seen celebrities, politicians, and rich guests. But this felt different. There was danger in the air, and she could feel it. Around 1 a.m., Maria returned to the 4th floor. The hallway was empty. As she walked past room 407 again, she noticed something that made her heart skip. The Do Not Disturb sign was gone. The door, which had been locked tightly before, was now slightly open, just a small crack. She stopped. Maybe he left, she whispered. But deep down, she knew that wasn't true. She pushed her cleaning cart slowly closer, trying not to make noise. Through the small gap, she saw Richard sitting by the desk, staring at the door, like he was waiting for someone. His face was pale. Suddenly, the elevator bell rang softly. Maria turned her head. The same 2 men from the lobby stepped out. But this time they weren't alone. 3 more men joined them, all wearing black jackets, all walking straight toward room 407. Maria's throat went dry. 5 men. None of them looked like hotel guests. They didn't even try to hide what they were doing. One of them pulled something metallic from his pocket, a tool to unlock the door. Maria panicked inside, but her body didn't move. She stood behind her cleaning cart, watching as the 5 men surrounded the suite door. They waited a moment, looked at each other, and then slipped inside quietly. The door closed. The hallway fell silent again. Maria's heart pounded. She could hear muffled voices now, low and angry. Richard's voice came once, louder than before. "You won't get away with this." Then a crash, like a glass breaking. Maria stepped back, shaking. Her instincts told her to run to the manager. But something deep inside told her the police would come too late. She gripped the handle of her cleaning cart tightly. Her breathing was fast, no one knew it yet. But this quiet maid, the one everyone ignored, was about to face something that would change her life forever. And in that silent hallway, she whispered to herself, "Not again. I can't let it happen again." Maria stood frozen in the hallway, her heart pounding like a drum. The 5 men had entered room 407 without knocking. She could still hear the faint echo of the door closing behind them. The air felt heavy, as if danger had filled the entire floor. For a few seconds, Maria couldn't move. Her mind screamed to run, to shout for help, but her instincts whispered something different. Be quiet, be smart. She pressed her ear against the service wall. Voices came from inside the room, low and tense. "Sign the paper," one man said sharply. Richard's voice came next, trembling but angry. "You'll never get the codes. I'd rather destroy everything." Maria's stomach tightened. It was no longer just a strange night. It was a crime happening right before her eyes. She looked around the hallway. The cameras, small round lenses in the ceiling, had tiny red lights that usually blinked non-stop. But now they were dark. No recording, no proof. Someone had turned them off. Maria's hands trembled as she held her mop, thinking. The front desk was far away. Even if she ran, the men would finish whatever they came for before help arrived. She took a deep breath. "Okay, Maria, think," she whispered to herself. There was a small side door near the stairwell, a service passage that connected all rooms on the 4th floor through maintenance panels. She had used it before to clean air filters. If she went through it quietly, she could get close enough to see what was happening inside room 407. Maria opened the metal panel and slipped inside the narrow passage. It was dark and dusty, with only the sound of pipes and air vents humming. She crawled slowly, her knees brushing against the metal floor. Through a small vent, she finally saw part of the room. Richard was sitting in a chair, hands tied behind his back with cable ties. His face had a small cut, blood shining on his cheek under the lamplight. One of the men stood in front of him, waving a gun. "Give us the drive," he said. "You know why we're here." "I told you it's not with me," Richard said. "You'll never find it." The man hit the table hard with his fist. "You think we're joking?" Another man searched the drawers and shelves, pulling things apart. "Nothing here," he said. Maria's heart raced. These weren't ordinary thieves, and they were professionals. They knew what they wanted. Suddenly, the vent under Maria's knee made a small clang. She froze. One of the men turned toward the sound. "What was that?" he said. "Probably the air system," another replied. "Ignore it." Maria covered her mouth, trying not to breathe too loud. Sweat ran down her forehead. She waited until their attention shifted again. Richard looked weak, but his eyes were sharp. Maria could see the way he was staring toward the ceiling, toward her vent. He had noticed her. For a second, their eyes met through the tiny metal grid. Maria's heart skipped. She shook her head slowly, signaling him to stay quiet. He blinked once in understanding. She needed a plan, and fast. Maria crawled back through the passage, her mind racing. She remembered something, the fire alarm system. There was a control box at the end of the corridor. If she triggered it, the alarm would sound and the sprinklers would go off. The attackers might panic or run, giving Richard a chance, but there was a risk. They might get violent. She whispered to herself, "If I do nothing, he'll die. If I act, maybe I can save him." Her decision was clear. Maria crawled out of the maintenance panel and quietly pushed her cleaning cart toward the alarm box. Her shoes made no sound on the soft carpet. She glanced once more at the suite door. Faint voices, footsteps inside. Her hand reached for the alarm handle. But before she could pull it, she heard something behind her. A voice. "Hey, what are you doing here?" She turned. One of the 5 men was standing right there in the hallway. He had stepped out of the room for a phone call. His eyes narrowed as he looked at her uniform, her cleaning cart, her trembling hand near the wall. I was just cleaning, sir," she stammered, forcing a nervous smile. "Sorry, I didn't mean to." He walked closer. "It's 2 a.m. You clean at this hour?" Maria's mind spun. "Special night shift," she said softly. "Hotel rule." The man studied her for a moment, then smirked. "Stay away from that room," he said coldly. "It's none of your business." He turned back inside, shutting the door. Maria's legs felt weak, but she didn't stop. Once he disappeared, she gritted her teeth and whispered, "Now or never." She pulled the alarm. A loud siren echoed through the hallways. Red lights flashed everywhere. Water poured from the ceiling sprinklers, soaking the carpets. Inside room 407, she heard chaos, shouting, things falling, glass breaking. Maria ducked behind her cart, pretending to panic like a normal maid. Other guests began opening their doors, confused and half asleep. The 5 men rushed out of the suite, trying to act calm, but their faces were pale. They split into 2 directions, 3 toward the stairs, 2 toward the elevator. One of them brushed past Maria, not even noticing her trembling hands. Richard didn't come out. Maria bit her lip. He's still inside. As soon as the hallway cleared, she ran into the suite. Richard was still tied, his mouth covered with tape. His eyes widened in shock as she cut the ties with a small knife from her cleaning kit. "Who are you?" he whispered. "Just someone trying to help," she said. But before they could move, she heard heavy footsteps coming back down the hall. The 5 men weren't done yet. They were coming back. Maria's hands shook as she pulled the last knot from Richard's wrists. Water from the sprinklers dripped from the ceiling, soaking her uniform. Richard coughed, trying to catch his breath. His expensive watch was cracked, and his eyes were full of fear, but also confusion. "Who are you?" he whispered again, staring at her like she was part of the mystery. "I'm just a maid," Maria said quickly. "But right now you need to move." She grabbed his arm and pulled him toward the back service door, the one only hotel workers used. Her heart pounded with every step. But just as they reached it, bang! The main door of the suite flew open. The men were back. "Stop them!" one shouted. Maria pushed Richard through the service door, slamming it behind her. She turned the lock and ran down the narrow hallway, guiding him toward the laundry room at the end of the floor. Richard could barely keep up. "How do you know these hallways?" he gasped. "I clean them every night," Maria said. "Now hurry." They reached the laundry room, dark and quiet except for the hum of machines. Maria shut the door and pressed her ear to it. Heavy footsteps echoed closer. "The men were searching. They're coming," Richard whispered. "We need the police." "The phones are dead," Maria said. "I tried earlier. They cut the hotel's lines." Richard looked at her, surprised. "You knew something was wrong before this?" Maria nodded slightly. "I saw them following you." He stared at her for a second, as if realizing she wasn't just an ordinary maid. "Why didn't you run?" he asked softly, her eyes darkened. "Because once before I did, and someone died because of it." The sound of her own words took her back, years ago, far away, in a different life. Maria hadn't always been a maid. She used to be Sergeant Maria Alvarez, a security officer in her country's special unit. She was trained in self-defense, surveillance, and tactical rescue. She had a husband, a young daughter, and a life full of purpose. But one night during an operation, her team was ambushed. Someone leaked their location. She survived, and her husband didn't. The guilt broke her. She left the force, changed her name, and moved to another country. She wanted peace, silence, and a normal job. For years, she told herself she was done with danger. She told herself she'd never fight again. But tonight, everything she buried was waking up again. Maria looked at Richard, who stood quietly, watching her think. "They're trained," she said finally. "Not random criminals. They move like a unit," Richard nodded slowly. "They work for a rival group. They want a data file, something I discovered about illegal arms funding. It's all in that drive. If they get it, many people will die." Maria's pulse quickened. "Then we can't let them have it." He blinked, surprised at her calm voice. "You're not afraid?" She gave a small smile. "I've seen worse nights than this." Outside the door, voices grew louder. "Check the laundry area." Maria looked around the room quickly. Metal shelves, carts, cleaning supplies, and a small vent near the ceiling. "We can't fight them head-on," she whispered. "But we can slow them down." She grabbed a can of aerosol spray and a lighter from the maintenance shelf. Richard's eyes widened. "What are you doing?" "Improvising," she said. When the door handle began to turn, Maria crouched behind the machine and flicked the lighter. The moment the first man pushed the door open, she sprayed the mist toward the flame. A burst of light and smoke filled the room. The men shouted, covering their faces. Maria kicked the door shut and pulled Richard toward the vent. "Up there, go!" He hesitated. "I can't fit." "You can if you try," she snapped. She pushed him upward, helping him crawl through the narrow space. Then she followed, just as another kick slammed the door open. Bullets hit the metal near her feet. Sparks flew. The vent was tight and the air inside was hot, but Maria kept moving, crawling forward, pushing Richard ahead. She could hear the men below shouting orders. "They're heading to the basement," one yelled. Maria whispered, "We'll go to the kitchen instead. More exits." After several long minutes, they reached a small grate above the hotel kitchen. The smell of cooked food and cleaning chemicals mixed in the air. Maria carefully kicked the vent open and dropped down, landing softly. Richard followed, stumbling but safe. The kitchen was empty. The chefs had left hours ago. Stainless steel counters and hanging pans surrounded them like silver armor. Richard leaned on a table, breathing hard. You're not just a maid," he said between breaths. Maria looked at him, her wet hair clinging to her face. "No," she said softly. "I used to protect people, but I failed once." He looked at her, understanding now. "Then maybe tonight you can make peace with that past." Maria said nothing, but deep inside something stirred. The part of her she'd buried long ago. The fighter. The protector. She looked toward the kitchen exit and said firmly, "We're not running anymore. We fight smart." Richard frowned. "How?" Maria picked up a knife from the counter and tucked it under her belt. "They think I'm a maid," she said. "Let's make that our advantage." Her voice was calm but fierce. For the first time that night, Richard saw hope and a hint of fire in her eyes. The storm outside thundered, rain crashing against the windows. The hotel lights flickered again. Maria stood by the door, listening. "They'll come soon," she said. "When they do, they won't expect what's waiting." And in that moment, the maid who once ran from her past was ready to face it again. The hotel kitchen was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator and the faint thunder outside. Maria stood still, every muscle tense. Her wet maid uniform clung to her skin, and her eyes were fixed on the steel door. The 5 men were somewhere above them, searching room by room. Richard leaned against the counter, still breathing hard. "How long before they find us?" he asked quietly. Maria didn't look at him. "Not long. They'll check the camera feeds, the service tunnels. They'll come down here soon." He swallowed hard. "We should hide." Maria shook her head slowly. "Hiding will only delay them. We need to make them think they've already won." Richard frowned. "What do you mean?" Maria turned to face him. Her calm eyes didn't match the chaos around them. "They think you're just a businessman. Weak, scared, easy to control. Let's use that. We'll trap them using their own plan." She moved quickly through the kitchen, her mind working like a map. She checked drawers, opened shelves, gathered supplies, duct tape, glass bottles, cleaning chemicals, and a few sharp knives. Richard watched her, confused. "You're making weapons?" "Distractions," she corrected. "Sometimes confusion wins more than strength." She took one empty wine bottle and poured ammonia and bleach into it, closing it tightly. "This will give us smoke," she explained. "Not deadly, but enough to blind them for a minute." Then she pointed toward the back hallway. "That's our escape route. But first we need them to walk into the trap." Upstairs, the men had split into 2 groups. The leader, a tall, bald man named Victor, spoke into his earpiece. "The cameras are still down. Search every floor. He's somewhere below." One of his men replied, "We found water trails near the service door. They're heading toward the basement." Victor smiled coldly. "Perfect. Flush them out." The group moved fast, heavy boots echoing down the staircase. Back in the kitchen, Maria could already hear faint footsteps above. She motioned for Richard to stay quiet. Then she opened the main freezer, a large metal room filled with boxes of frozen meat. "Hide in here," she whispered. Richard hesitated. "No, I can't leave you." Maria cut him off with a sharp look. "You want to help? Then do what I say. I need them to think you're gone." He understood. He stepped inside, shivering from the cold, and Maria closed the door behind him. Not fully locked, just enough to keep him safe. Then she took a deep breath. Her heart was steady now, her fear replaced by focus. A few moments later, the kitchen door burst open. 2 men entered first, guns raised. The others spread out behind them, scanning the area. "Empty," one said. "He's not here." Victor stepped in last, calm and confident. "Search anyway. He could be hiding." Maria crouched behind a counter, watching them through the reflection of a hanging pan. When one of the men walked past the stove, she tossed the bottle toward the corner and ducked. It shattered, and thick white smoke filled the air. The men coughed, shouting, "What the hell is that?" Maria sprang up from behind the counter and slammed a metal tray into one man's arm, making his gun fall. Then she kicked the other's leg and pushed him against a shelf. Dishes crashed to the floor. Victor pulled out his gun and fired, but she ducked behind the metal counter, the bullet sparking against the steel. He cursed, shouting, "Find her! She's just a maid." But Maria was already moving. She grabbed a fire extinguisher and aimed it toward the smoke, spraying a thick white cloud that made the room even harder to see. Then she slipped behind Victor and hit him across the back with the heavy extinguisher. He stumbled, furious but still standing. "You think you can stop me?" he growled. Maria glared at him. "No, but I can delay you." He swung his arm, punching her shoulder hard. Pain shot through her, but she didn't fall. She blocked the next hit with her elbow and kicked him in the chest. The sound of metal clanged as he fell against a counter. But before she could move again, one of the other men grabbed her from behind. She struggled, twisting his arm, but he was strong. "Let her go." Richard's voice echoed suddenly. Victor turned his head. The freezer door was open. Richard stood there, holding a large kitchen knife. His hands shook, but his eyes were determined. Victor laughed. "What are you going to do, rich boy?" "Cut me?" Richard didn't answer. He threw the knife, not at Victor, but at the hanging lights above. The blade hit the wire perfectly, cutting it. The light swung down and hit Victor's shoulder, stunning him. Maria used the chance to elbow the man holding her and pushed him away. She grabbed Richard's arm. "Run!" They sprinted toward the back hallway. Victor shouted behind them, "After them!" "Don't let them leave this building." Bullets hit the walls as Maria and Richard ran down the narrow passage. Maria pushed through a door labeled service elevator and slammed the button. The doors opened slowly, painfully slow. "Hurry," Richard said. She grabbed a metal cart and pushed it into the hallway just as the men appeared. "That'll buy us a few seconds," she said, shoving him inside. The elevator doors closed. The sound of gunfire echoed, but the lift began to move downward. Richard leaned against the wall, panting. "You just fought trained men." "With cleaning tools." Maria gave a tired smile. "Tools are only as smart as the person using them." He looked at her with awe. "You saved my life twice tonight." She didn't answer. Her eyes were fixed on the small floor display. B2 basement level. When the elevator stopped, she said quietly, "It's not over yet. They'll come again. But this time, we'll end it." Thunder roared above the hotel, and somewhere in the darkness, Victor shouted into his radio, "Seal every exit. The maid dies first." And down below, Maria tightened her grip on the knife she had kept, her face calm, but her mind sharp as steel. The real battle was just beginning. The elevator stopped with a faint ding on the basement floor. The lights flickered once, then stayed dim. The air felt cold and heavy, the kind of silence that comes right before danger. Maria stepped out first, scanning the long, concrete hallway. Pipes ran along the ceiling, and the sound of dripping water echoed in the distance. This was the service area, a maze of storage rooms, laundry units, and delivery tunnels. Richard followed carefully, clutching his arm where the rope had bruised his skin earlier. "Where are we?" he asked quietly. "The basement," Maria said. "There's a side door that leads to the parking lot. If we reach it, you can escape." He looked at her. "What about you?" Maria didn't answer right away. "I'll make sure they don't follow you," she said finally. They moved quickly, their footsteps splashing through small puddles on the floor. The emergency lights glowed faint red, giving the walls an eerie look. Maria's mind worked fast. The men would be coming down soon. Victor wasn't the type to give up. He'd block every exit. She needed another plan, something that would turn this dark, empty place into her advantage. "Maria," Richard said softly, "why are you risking your life for me? You don't even know me." Maria stopped and turned to him. "I know what it feels like to lose someone because no one helped," she said. Her voice was quiet but firm. "I won't make that mistake again." Richard's eyes softened, but before he could reply, a distant sound echoed, the creak of the elevator door opening. "They're here," Maria whispered. 5 shadows appeared at the far end of the corridor, moving fast. Their flashlights swept across the walls. Victor's voice boomed, cold and angry. "You can't run forever. Hand over the drive, Hale," Richard whispered. "They'll kill us." Maria's expression didn't change. "Not if they can't see us." She grabbed his hand and pulled him into a side room marked boiler maintenance. Inside, the air was hot and smelled like metal. Pipes hissed with steam and valves clicked slowly. Maria quickly turned a wheel, letting more steam fill the room. "Stay low," she said. "They'll lose visibility." Richard crouched beside her. "What are you planning?" Maria gave a small, confident smile. "Something they don't teach in business school." The door burst open. The men entered cautiously, their flashlights slicing through the fog. Victor's sharp voice echoed, "Spread out. She's here somewhere." Maria waited in the shadows, counting their steps. One man passed close to her, and too close. She reached out, grabbed his arm, and slammed him against the pipe. The sound was drowned by the hissing steam. The man collapsed silently. Another turned toward the noise. "What was that?" Maria picked up a small wrench and threw it across the room. It clattered on the other side, and he turned the wrong way. In 2 quick steps, she moved behind him, struck his knee, and pushed him into the wall. Victor noticed the movement. "There!" he shouted, firing his gun blindly into the mist. Metal sparked. Steam hissed louder. The room filled with smoke and chaos. Maria grabbed Richard's hand again. "Now," she whispered. They ran out through a side door, down another hallway. Richard's heart pounded. "You just took down 2 of them," he said breathlessly. "You're unbelievable." Maria didn't look back. "I'm just surviving," she said. "And so are you." They reached a door marked exit. Maria pushed the handle. Locked. She cursed under her breath. Behind them, Victor's voice echoed again, closer now. "I'll make this simple, Hale. Give me the drive and I'll let your hero live." Richard's jaw tightened. "He's lying," Maria said. "He won't let either of us walk away." She scanned the area. Boxes, tools, and an old fuse panel on the wall. Then her eyes lit up. "Electric control," she said. "If I overload the power, we can kill the lights." Richard's eyes widened. "You mean in the whole hotel?" She nodded. "Exactly. Darkness levels the game." Maria opened the fuse box and started rewiring. Sparks flew as she worked quickly, hands steady despite the danger. Richard stood beside her, holding the metal pipe she had given him, his first weapon of the night. Victor's footsteps grew louder. "I'm warning you," he shouted. "I'll shoot her first," Maria whispered. "Hold your breath." She flipped the switch. The lights across the basement exploded into darkness. Suddenly, the world went black. Only faint red emergency bulbs glowed, blinking slowly. Maria moved like a shadow. She grabbed a cleaning spray bottle from a cart and sprayed it toward the light of Victor's flashlight. He coughed, blinded for a second. She hit him hard with the pipe Richard handed her earlier. He stumbled back, firing a wild shot that shattered a nearby pipe. Steam burst out, covering everything in a white cloud. The air filled with noise. Steam hissing, footsteps running, shouts mixing with gunfire. Maria ducked behind a crate, her breathing calm and even. She could see Victor moving slowly, searching. Then, out of the corner of her eye, she saw something glinting, a dropped taser, lying near one of the unconscious men. She crawled, grabbed it, and waited. When Victor turned the corner, his flashlight cutting through the smoke, Maria stepped forward and pressed the taser against his side. A sharp crackling sound filled the air. Victor's body jolted and fell to the floor. He lay there, twitching, his gun sliding away. Richard stood frozen, eyes wide in disbelief. Maria exhaled slowly and said, "That should keep him quiet." The other 2 men, seeing their leader down, finally ran. Their footsteps faded into the tunnel, fear replacing their mission. Maria looked at Richard and gave a small, tired smile. "It's over. For now." He stepped closer, his voice soft. "You saved my life again. 3 times, maybe." She shrugged. "Let's just call it teamwork." As they walked toward the exit, Richard looked at her. The soaked maid with blood on her sleeve, calm eyes and quiet strength. He finally said, "You're not invisible anymore. Maria, you're the reason I'm alive." Maria looked away, hiding the small tear in her eye. "Heroes don't wear suits," she said softly. "Sometimes they carry mops." Outside, sirens finally wailed in the distance. The police were coming, and for the first time that night, Maria let herself breathe. But deep in her heart, she knew. This was not just about saving a billionaire. It was about finding the part of herself she thought was gone forever. The unseen hero had returned. The police sirens grew louder outside the hotel, flashing blue and red lights through the basement windows. Maria and Richard stood near the side exit, both soaked, bruised, and breathing heavily. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The night had been filled with chaos, fear, fighting, and survival. But now that it was quiet, the weight of everything began to sink in. Richard looked at Maria. Her hands were scraped, her uniform torn, yet her eyes were still sharp and calm. "You could have run," he said quietly. "You could have left me. Why didn't you?" Maria didn't answer right away. She looked at the rising dawn light creeping through the window. "Because I've already run once before," she said softly. "And I promise myself never again." Minutes later, police officers stormed into the basement, weapons ready. The two surviving attackers were caught in the tunnels, while medics carried Victor out on a stretcher, unconscious but alive. Richard tried to explain what had happened, but the officers seemed confused. To them it looked impossible. A hotel maid taking down a team of armed men. One officer asked, "Ma'am, who trained you?" "You don't fight like a maid." Maria gave a faint smile. "Maybe I cleaned too many dangerous rooms," she said simply. But inside her past was stirring again, a past she had buried deep. As the chaos settled, a detective approached. He was tall, gray-haired, with kind but sharp eyes. His badge read Detective Harris. "I'm told you saved this man's life," Harris said to Maria. "That's no small thing." Maria nodded politely. "I just did what needed to be done." Harris studied her face. "Your name is Maria Lopez, right?" "Yes," she said, avoiding his gaze. He flipped through a small notebook. "Funny thing," he said slowly. "We couldn't find any record of you before 5 years ago. No work permit, no previous address. It's like you appeared out of nowhere." Maria's heart skipped. "Maybe the system made a mistake," she said quickly. Harris's tone softened. "I don't care about your past, Miss Lopez. You saved a man's life. But people like those men, they don't just target anyone. You should be careful. You've made enemies tonight." Maria nodded silently. Outside, reporters had already gathered. Cameras flashed. Voices shouted questions. "Mr. Hale, were you kidnapped? Is it true a hotel maid saved your life? Who is she?" Maria tried to step away, but Richard stopped her. "You don't have to hide," he said softly. "You deserve to be known." She looked at him, tired but firm. "Fame doesn't save lives, Richard. It only brings more danger." "But you risked everything," he said. "People need to know courage like yours still exists." She smiled faintly. "Courage isn't loud. It's quiet. It's the thing that makes you move when everyone else freezes." They sat on the curb outside the hotel as dawn broke over the city. The golden light reflected on the wet pavement, making the world look clean again, almost peaceful. Richard finally spoke. "I owe you more than I can ever repay." "You owe me nothing," Maria said softly. "You just owe the truth, to the people you protect, to the ones who believe in your company. You can start by being the kind of man who doesn't hide behind others." Richard looked at her, deeply moved. "I will, I promise." Later that morning, inside the hotel lobby, the news spread fast. Staff members whispered her name, staring in awe as she walked by. The quiet maid who once went unnoticed was now the center of every story. But Maria didn't stay for attention. She went straight to the manager's office, handed in her cleaning badge, and said, "I think it's time for me to leave." The manager, an older man who had known her for years, looked shocked. "Leave after what you did?" "Maria, they'll give you an award." She shook her head. "I don't want medals. I just want peace." Outside, Richard waited for her near his car. His face was clean now, his clothes changed, but his eyes were still full of questions. "Where will you go?" he asked as she walked up to him. "Somewhere quiet," she said. "Maybe start fresh again." He hesitated, then said, "You could work with me. My company's security team needs someone like you. You'd have a real future, no hiding." Maria smiled sadly. "A future built on fighting? No, thank you. I've done enough of that." "But the world needs people like you," he said earnestly. She looked at him for a long moment. "Maybe," she said softly. "But heroes don't always stand in the light, Richard. Some just keep the world clean enough for others to shine." A silence grew between them, the kind that holds more words than it speaks, finally. Richard reached into his pocket and took out a small silver pendant, a security badge engraved with her name. "I'll keep this," he said quietly. "So I never forget the maid who saved my life," Maria smiled. "Keep it as a reminder that anyone, even someone ordinary, can make a difference." She turned and began walking down the street, her figure growing smaller as the morning crowd filled the sidewalks. Richard watched her go, feeling something he hadn't felt in years, respect mixed with hope. Detective Harris stepped beside him. "You think she'll be okay?" he asked. Richard nodded slowly. "She's not running this time. She's just finding her own peace," Harris smiled faintly. "Funny. Sometimes the people who save others need saving the most." Richard looked up at the sky where the first full light of day had broken through the clouds. "Maybe she already saved herself," he said quietly. And somewhere across the city, Maria walked into a small park, sunlight touching her face. She sat on a bench, closed her eyes, and for the first time in years, she smiled, not because she was safe, but because she had finally forgiven herself. The truth was out. Not about her past, but about who she really was, a fighter, a protector, a woman who found her strength again. And even if the world forgot her name, Maria knew one thing: the truth always shines quietly, like a hero no one sees. 2 months had passed since that night at the Royal Heights Hotel, the night that changed Maria's life forever. The city had moved on, but whispers of the Maid hero still spread quietly in news articles and online posts. Some people believed it was a made-up story. Others said she was an angel in disguise. But no one knew where she had gone. Richard Hale did. He had tried many times to find her, sent people, called hotels, checked old records, but Maria had vanished completely, like a shadow fading into dawn. Until one morning, a letter arrived at his office. It had no sender's name. Just a simple line written in neat handwriting. "Don't look for me. Keep doing good. That's how you thank me." Richard smiled sadly when he read it. "Still watching," he whispered. Far from the tall glass buildings of the city, in a small coastal town, Maria was living a new life. She had rented a tiny house near the sea, with white curtains and a garden full of flowers. Every morning she swept the porch, made tea, and listened to the sound of waves crashing against the rocks. It was peaceful, the peace she had searched for all her life. But Maria was not the same woman who had once just cleaned rooms and hid her past. Something inside her had awakened that night, a quiet strength she could no longer ignore. One afternoon, as she walked through the marketplace, she noticed a young girl being shouted at by 2 men near a store. The girl looked terrified, holding a small bag close to her chest. Maria watched for a moment. Old instincts whispered inside her, the same voice that had saved lives before. She walked over calmly. "Is there a problem?" she asked. One man turned toward her. "Mind your business, lady," he snapped. Maria's eyes narrowed slightly. "I am." Her calm voice made him hesitate. She stepped between them, facing the girl. "Go home," Maria said softly. "You're safe now." The girl ran, clutching her bag. The 2 men looked angry but didn't move. Something in Maria's eyes made them stop, a silent warning, a quiet authority. They turned and left without another word. Maria sighed and continued walking, her heart steady. She didn't want fights. But she knew strength wasn't about fighting. It was about standing when others couldn't. That evening, she sat by the shore watching the sunset paint the sea gold. The waves shimmered like melted light. A voice behind her said, "I knew I'd find you here." Maria turned. Richard stood a few feet away, smiling gently. He looked different. Simpler clothes, no guards, no fear in his eyes. She smiled faintly. "You're late," she said. He laughed softly. "Took me 2 months." They sat together on the sand, quiet for a while, listening to the sea. "I read your letter," he said finally. "But I couldn't stay away. I needed to see how you were doing." "I'm alive," Maria said. "That's enough," Richard nodded. "You did more than save me that night. You reminded me what real courage looks like. I built a foundation in your name, the Maria Initiative. It trains women in self-defense and crisis skills, for maids, nurses, and ordinary workers, people who are usually invisible." Maria blinked in surprise. "You used my name?" "I had to," he said softly. "You gave me a story worth telling." She looked away, her voice barely a whisper. "I didn't save you for fame." "I know," he said. "That's why it matters." A soft wind blew across the beach, carrying the scent of salt and distant rain. Richard looked at her again. "You can run from your past, Maria, but you can't hide your purpose. You were meant to protect." She smiled gently. "Maybe, but protection doesn't always mean fighting. Sometimes it means teaching. He tilted his head. Teaching? Maria nodded. There's a community center here. The kids come after school. Some of the girls are scared of life, of men, of failure. I've been showing them how to stay strong. Inside and out. Richard smiled proudly. You're still saving people. Maria looked out at the ocean. Maybe. But this time it's with peace, not fear. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the first stars appeared. Richard stood up and brushed the sand from his jacket. If you ever want to come back to the city to help us train others, the door's open. Maria smiled, standing too. Thank you, but I think my work is right where I am. He nodded in understanding. Then at least promise me one thing. If you ever need help, call. She chuckled softly. You're the one who needed saving, remember? He laughed. Guess I still do sometimes. They shook hands, not as Billionaire and Maid, but as two survivors who had changed each other's paths. After he left, Maria sat back down on the sand. The waves touched her feet gently, like the world was thanking her. She closed her eyes, hearing her late husband's voice in her memory. You can't stop storms. Maria, you just learn how to stand in the rain. A tear rolled down her cheek, but she smiled. For the first time, she wasn't haunted by the past. She was guided by it. She whispered to herself, you were right. I didn't lose my strength. I just forgot where I left it. A few days later, the local newspaper wrote a small story. Former hotel maid teaches self-defense to young women. She says everyone has power inside them. They just have to stop being afraid to use it. Maria laughed when she saw it. She didn't want fame, but maybe the message was enough. That evening, she stood by the window watching the sunset again. The same sky, the same sea, but a different woman. Her reflection in the glass looked calm, confident and strong, because the world didn't need to know her name anymore. It only needed to remember her message, and that real power lives quietly in the hearts of ordinary people. And as the last rays of the sun touched her face, Maria whispered to the wind, once I was invisible. Now I am free.